Maxusthebeast is here, and welcome back to Storytime. Now, I know I was going to have a different video up around this time, but I think if any of you have been watching or keeping after my Discord messages or Instagram posts, I think it's time that I give a quick synopsis of what happened the past few days. Apologies if I slur my words a bit more or am quieter. I am still in the recovery process for my wisdom tooth surgery. So, if I'm harder to understand, that's why. With that being said, let's get into it. So it all started on Wednesday, June the 10th, the day I had my surgery. I had just gotten back from the oral surgeon's office and was laying down to rest. My parents, being my parents, were helping to assist me lay down and get anything that I might need. During a conversation with him, I could barely talk. This was like mere minutes after the surgery had happened. It'd been maybe a half hour. So I was still fresh out the operating room. So of course I wouldn't be able to communicate clearly. I was trying my best to tell them what I wanted to tell them, but I was having a little effort. My dad spoke up, but in the middle of a sentence we heard this strange screeching noise from my gaming setup. None of us knew what it was, but my dad went in to check out what was going on, and he claimed that my external hard drive was squealing. He turned off my PC and turned off the electrical switches I have underneath my desk to make sure that there would be absolutely no risk of fire. Because we didn't know what was going on. We didn't know if this was the sound of it getting ready to blow up, or if this was just something about to die, or what was going on. So we turned off everything, and that was that. I didn't think too much of it, although I was still curious as to what was going on. The next day, I came back into my setup. I was feeling a little bit better, good enough to get out of bed. I wasn't in as much pain as I thought I would be in. I was told that this would be a very excruciating recovery, that it was going to be rough. And while day 1 wasn't the greatest, it wasn't bad either. And day 2 was honestly a lot better than I guess technically day 1 was better than ground 0, I guess, or day 0. So I came in to investigate what was going on. I turned my PC back on and plugged in my external hard drive. It beeped. Occasionally, just side note, occasionally the hard drive will make beeping noises. I have a Seagate hard drive, or external hard drive. So, and occasionally, if it's not working properly, it'll beep. But it usually doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with it per se, in the sense that there's nothing wrong in the sense that it's not going to blow up or nothing. It's not busted. It usually means that it'll have issues loading stuff, and then I'll have to do a scan on my PC to fix it. So that's what I intended to do. I turned everything back on and started running a scan. However, my PC suddenly froze in the middle of the scan, forcing me to do a hard reset. Because nothing was working, I couldn't click on anything, I couldn't tell the scan to cancel, I couldn't even move my mouse. So a hard reset was inevitable. When I turned my PC back on, everything was fine. I just had to restart the scan. The scan went through as normal and finished as normal, and I didn't think too much of it other than the fact that, okay, that was weird. Later on, the next day, or later that evening actually, I was coming back in here to have another session of games and just chat with a friend. And I was trying to get Sea of Thieves working, because, of course, that's the game that we were going to be playing together. However, for some reason, Sea of Thieves had uninstalled itself. So, thankfully my internet is good enough so it could handle a large download in like an hour or two time, so it could be worse, but again, an hour isn't that bad. I was still kind of confused as to why my PC had deleted the game, but whatever, it wasn't that big of an inconvenience. I just had to wait another hour. I click on the install button on Steam and try to tell it to reinstall to the external hard drive that I had plugged back in. Only thing was, I couldn't find the Steam library that I had set up for that hard drive. It said start a new, or locate or create a new hard drive for, not hard drive, a new folder for that hard drive. Which was weird because I already had a Steam library set up for that particular hard drive. So I tried to pathfind it. I had tried to get Steam to pathfind its way to that particular library, but it wouldn't. I tried to get it to find it in any way I possibly could. I even, as an experiment to see what was going on, I first unplugged the hard drive, then plugged it back in, nothing. I also decided to try to install Sea of Thieves onto another disk to see if it wasn't Steam's fault, but instead was something to do with the hard drive. And the second that I chose a different hard drive, it installed like a charm. However, there was a weird smell permeating through the room. It smelled almost like something had burnt, which is never a good smell to have. But there wasn't too much I could do. Nothing seemed to be immediately on fire. And I did some research while I was waiting for Sea of Thieves to reinstall. And it turns out that I was due for a monthly cleaning anyway. And I believe that dust buildup might have been the problem. That some dust briefly caught on fire, but now everything was more than likely good. So I was out of canned air. My dad was going to go to the store the next day, so I requested that he picked up some canned air. He did. And so the next day, I sprayed out my PC. It seemed like that did the trick. Sea of Thieves was still downloading, however, the night before I had cut it off during the download because, again, I wanted to make sure that nothing was going to catch on fire. Better safe than sorry. So I cut down the PC, starting it up the next day and finishing up the download. I was feeling really tired that day, so I decided to go back and to get back in bed. But later that evening, I got back on, and that's when the fun started. I was going to sit down and play some games and watch some YouTube because my friend was unavailable at the moment. So, while I was watching YouTube, the smell came back. Again, I didn't really know what to do with it, or what was wrong, or how to fix it, or if anything was wrong. Again, it could have just been dust. I'd already sprayed out the PC and everything in terms of dust was looking good. I had cleaned out everything. There shouldn't have been any dust. I was wondering if maybe like a bug had crawled in there somehow and caught on fire. But again, I found no proof of that. And I thought my cleaning would have been good enough to find any dead bugs. So I watched YouTube for a little bit longer. I didn't think too much of it. But then the smell continued, and I leaned in closer to my PC and smelled, and it was coming from the PC for sure. Because, again, I didn't know if it was just leftover smell from the previous time, and it was just like still permeating through the room or not. Just kind of remnants of it were still there. But I decided once I smelled it again, I cut off the PC and went to bed. I was really panicking because I was afraid that something had caught on fire in the PC and that someone was going to break, and I didn't know what I was going to do with that. If that happened, of course. So, the next day, I called a good friend of mine and talked to him about it. He had helped put together the PC. His brother had actually helped build this PC for me. Or rather, had built the entire thing for me, which was a very, very kind Christmas gift. So, I trusted him in his insight on all things tech savvy, because again, I'm still not perfect when it comes to building PCs, and my own research was getting me nowhere. So the first question that was asked was, what's going on? I described the problem, that there was a weird smell, and by this time, I started the PC. I was going to call him on Discord on the PC, so we can actually hear each other better. When I did, the PC started to sound like it was a bloody printer. It started making like this chugging noise. And I had no clue what was going on with that. So, I held my phone close to the PC. I took the side casing off to see if I could stick my phone in there for better noise, or just perhaps letting it air out would be a good thing. Because again, I had no clue what was going on. I put my finger on the power supply, just as a what if, because that's where the noise was coming from. And the sucker was hot, really abnormally hot to the touch, especially since I hadn't been doing a thing on the PC up until that point. I had just literally turned the thing on. It shouldn't have been steaming hot on startup. So, of course, the next natural question was, what kind of power supply is this? I told him the brand name and the wattage. He looked it up. And with power supplies, in order for them to be legal, I mean, you can have them sold without this, but the high quality power supplies are usually certified with something called 80+, which ever since 2005, power supplies for pre-builds and, again, the most reputable and high quality ones are certified under 80+. My friend looked up this power supply, and this particular unit was not 80+ certified. Again, it's not illegal to sell a non-80+ power supply or own one. But what is illegal is if that power supply was advertised as 80+ certified, but actually was not. Neither of us knew if the original thing on Newegg had said that it was certified or not, but we assumed that it was. So now we're dealing with a potentially illegal power supply. Nothing that you, the consumer, could get penalized for, but definitely something that the manufacturer, not really of the computer, but of that particular power supply, the salesperson of that power supply, that's something that person would definitely be penalized for had that discovery been made. Looking up reviews of that power supply led to the conclusion of many consumers that many other consumers, after 6 months of owning that power supply, it blew. It outright died. So chances are that all the weird noises I had been hearing for the past few days and the smell of smoke were not from my hard drive. There is more than likely nothing wrong with the hard drive. All the weird stutters and issues I've been experiencing weren't hard drive related, but instead were coming from my power supply, which again was not certified as it should have been, And I had owned the unit for almost 6 months. So if the other consumers were to be believed, then I would be approaching the death day for my unit. I had previously the night before texted my friend about the issue when we had scheduled a call that day or that night. But we'd also scheduled a visit where they'd come over and take a peek at the PC and see what they could do to fix whatever was going on. Because again, the day before we hadn't diagnosed that this was power supply or not. We still thought that maybe this was hard drive, but we were still going to take a peek at the PC in general just to diagnose and solve the problem. But now that we had an actual diagnosis, we could do something about it. Thankfully, I still have my old PC. I never got rid of it, never sold it. I was considering selling it to a cousin a few months ago. However, he ended up purchasing a pre-build, so he no longer needed mine. So all this time I've been hanging on to my old PC. Just been kind of sitting around in my setup area doing nothing, accumulating dust. So the plan was that my friends would come over and we would replace the power supply. We'd take out the faulty one and then add in the one from my old PC. But my friend said that it would more likely be fine, the one I currently had, because I'd probably have another couple weeks with it before anything happened. So with this knowledge, I said thanks for the insight, and we hung up. About an hour later, I had texted another friend, wanted to play some Sea of Thieves, same friend from earlier. Not the one with the PC knowledge, but just the friend that I've been playing Sea of Thieves with for the past few days. And in fact, he's the person in this footage here. And he was currently preoccupied, so I watched YouTube for a little bit, took an antibiotic because I was due for that, and then it was time to play. Loaded up Sea of Thieves, and normally when I run games, sometimes that are CPU heavy, my PC will start making a bit of noise, but it's not out of the ordinary, it's fine, everything works smoothly, and then after I end the session, everything calms back down. It's nothing out of the ordinary and nothing strange. However, during this particular session, I still had the side casing off, so I could still hear everything inside the PC perfectly. The chugging noise came back. And then it started squealing. The same high-pitched squeal that we had heard the other day. My friend couldn't really hear this, but I could. And this was more than likely a fault on my part. But again, with the knowledge, I was under the assumption that I'd be fine for the foreseeable future until my friends could get over and swap out the power supplies. So I'm like, okay, noise is weird, but noise shouldn't be that bad, right? Noise was very bad. About 30 minutes into our Sea of Thieves sessions, my monitor cuts off. And then the LEDs inside my computer cut off. And then 2 consecutive explosions sound from my power supply. The sucker bit the dust, and it bit it hard. I called my friend back on Discord on my phone and explained to him what happened. But again, there was nothing I could do at that point. The sucker had died violently, and there was nothing I could do. I also texted my other friend asking him telling him that the sucker blew up and next steps of action. In the meantime, while waiting for a response, my Sea of Thieves friend and I hung up. And honestly, if I hadn't have already had this appointment or this get-together scheduled to replace the power supply, I think I would have been panicking a lot more than I already was. I was worried for sure, but I wasn't having an outright panic attack because I believed that in just a short amount of time, I'd have the PC repaired. But the more I read on it while waiting for a response, the more I read online, the worse it got. Because I saw people whose power supplies blew up and it took out their motherboard or it took out their entire PC. Again, I'd only had this PC for 6 months. And the thought of just more than likely my mistake leading to the entire thing dying was enough to scare me. Now, thankfully, my friend reassured me. He finally responded saying that most likely situation, absolute worst case scenario was it took everything. But most likely situation, if anything too terribly had happened, it would have taken the motherboard. Which would still be really bad, but recently motherboard prices have dropped significantly, so I could just save up and replace it whenever I get the money, which would still be a decent amount of time, and I still have to have the sucker installed, but it could have been worse. But the absolute best case scenario is that the power supply just suicided, and that's the end of story. That the power supply exploded, and that's all. But again, I had no way of knowing or assessing damage until my friends would arrive. But the day of this recording, my friends arrived, and we began the tedious process of replacing a power supply. Because the worst thing about replacing a power supply is unwiring everything that is attached to it. Because motherboard, of course, the graphics card, fans, some hard drives and things, all of that is attached to the power supply. So it's a lot of work to unwire everything. So after unwiring the broken one, we opened up, or starting work on unwiring the broken one, we started opening up my old PC. But here's the good thing. While the sucker wasn't 80 plus certified, it was a decently strong power supply supporting 600 watts, which would be enough for my PC to be able to run with the components it has. But thankfully, we found out when we opened up my other PC, the power supply in my old PC was 80 plus certified. It had the official stamp on the side of it and was also 600 watts. We lucked out. So after the tedious process of unwiring both busted and the other power supply, we moved the unit over to my current PC and then proceeded to cross our fingers and toes that it would boot. Because if it wouldn't boot after changing the power supply, that means that the explosion had in fact taken something else with it. But the second we push the power button, before the initial power button, there's two power buttons on the PC. One powers up the power supply, and then one boots up the entire PC. I have LEDs plugged into the power supply. So when the power supply would come on, there would be a generic red LED light that would trigger alongside it. And thankfully, those lights came on. And after the lights came on, that was our sign that it would more than likely boot. We pressed the regular power button, and the PC booted up as normal. Now, a moment of truth was to seeing if it could handle games without going into seizure mode. So we hooked up a couple controllers, and booted up Mortal Kombat 11, and played through several rounds. Pretty much an hour went by, and nothing went wrong. Everything proceeded as usual. And just a few minutes before recording, I finished the Sea of Thieves sessions with a friend, and everything is working smoothly. So there you go. Some advice is don't own a power supply or don't use a power supply that is not 80 plus certified. It might last you a few months, however, don't expect it to last you for long term, and it may end up proving detrimental to your PC's health in the long term. Because again, a potential side effect of a power supply detonating would be the death of other PC parts, which thankfully I didn't experience. However, have been plenty of other people who have. So be very, very cautious. Make sure that your power supplies are all 80 plus certified, and you shouldn't have anything to worry about. So thank you guys for watching this video. Have you had any other strange experiences with your own power supplies or other PC components? If so, let me know in the comment section down below. Again, sorry for the lack of content over the past few days. Firstly, it's been hard to record with the sore mouth, and then with all the technical difficulties going on, it was difficult to just do anything. I meant to have some content pre-recorded and released during my recovery time. However, that just unfortunately didn't happen. I'm going to get back in beeswax this week, and everything should be operational and all as it should be in the coming weeks. Again, I'm still working on Geekz Week, and so you'll have an announcement up in the near future. Anyway, guys, thanks again for watching, and thanks again for your understanding. And as always, Maxusthebeast is out.